And I remember this was a huge revelation to me one day. Listening to Manly P. Hall, because it just popped up, lectures on YouTube. And if you remember, many years ago, actually became really popular, especially like in the Zeitgeist time period. All the Zeitgeist people, oh yeah, have you listened to like Manly P. Hall's lectures on astrology? And it's probably still on YouTube, but it was like, I don't know, 20 lectures from Manly P. Hall on the history of and the importance of astrology. So I remember listening to, I don't think I listened to all of them, but I listened to a lot of them. And then you get to the end of the lecture, I kid you not. And I promise you, go, somebody should go find it. He says in like the last lecture, okay, so you've listened to all of this. And he says, the real purpose of all of what I'm telling you is because mankind must at this astrological juncture become Fabian socialist and come under the United Nations. And I'm like, so wait a minute, so all this gibberish that you just spent hours lecturing on was just to sell everybody on United Nations Fabian socialism. Literally, that's what he says. So I started thinking, wait a minute, so this is just for a big like geopolitical agenda. This is not some real mystery religion. Now, I'm not saying that none of the people are serious about their occult mystery religion. But Albert Pike says in his thing, right, and they're both famous Masons, right? Probably the two of the most famous Freemasons in America, Pike and Manly P. Hall. Pike says that it's a thing that you deceive the lower initiates about. And then at the higher levels, they know that it's really, about an inner elite agenda that's not really about all this gibberish, mystical mumbo jumbo. So if it's not really about mystical mumbo jumbo, then what's it really about? Now, some people are serious about the mystical mumbo jumbo. Okay, so what about this guy? Remember Crowley? So he comes out of a Black Lodge, dark Masonic tradition. And he seems to have, for many years, at least as far as we can tell, taken his black magic seriously. But even he says, I think in Liber Oz or one of these books, something like, blah, 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 if any of this even does anything, talking about his rituals. So even he seems to act like we don't even know if this stuff actually does anything. But if it does, blah, 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 blah. Right? So it's like he throws in this little element. But then I noticed, hey, wait a minute. Maybe he wasn't really doing what he was doing ultimately because he thought he was going to become a God man. Maybe he was serving something else. And is there any history or connection with, say, British intelligence and occult societies? Oh, and what do we know? Why, it just so happens, not just British intelligence and Crowley, but going back many centuries, British intelligence and the Elizabethan circles, back to John Dee, to the Rosicrucians. What do you know? And this is a famous scholarly text. It's not a conspiracy text. These are scholarly texts. That's what we work from here. Okay, we have filtered out mumbo jumbo, and we work from academic and scholarly texts on my channel. We don't do mumbo jumbo. We do symbology. We break down symbolism, but we do it in an academic way. And it turns out one of her first early chapters is on none other than the first 007, John Dee. And John Dee's spycraft. So they're actually spy networks. That's what I'm trying to say. And in other texts, like historical texts, then I started to realize, hey, wait a minute. Historians point out that Freemasonry was the intelligence network of the British Empire. Spies. That's what this stuff is. Manipulating, controlling human beings, social engineering, spy networks. Because what's the perfect network for spying and trading secrets? Secret societies. Where do intelligence agencies come out of? Secret societies. John Dee's magical language. Wonder what that is. That's ciphers to send messages. Now, do some people take this serious? Sure. Yeah, there's some people who really think that they can do butt stuff and then they have magic. But some people are not doing it for that. Some people know that it's just about controlling and running society. And as I've said for a long time, it's both of those things. Some people really believe it. Some people are just doing intelligence operations. And by the way, if you doubt me on the Hegel thing, get Hegel in the Hermetic tradition, because you'll note that he says the exact same thing that Albert Pike says. Now, I don't know that Hegel was a Freemason, but Hegel seems to have been influenced by esoteric societies kind of in his day. He seems to have been influenced by Jacob Boehme. He seems to have been influenced by... There's a whole list of dudes at the beginning of this book that were popular pre-Hegel that Hegel probably was influenced by. So this is esoteric figures like Nicholas of Cusa, Kabbalists like Renaissance Kabbalists like Johann Reuchlin, I think. Yes. And Reuchlin had a Christian Kabbalah which influenced Hegel, because if you notice, Hegel takes Christianity and just reinterprets it as his... It's a bastard version, a dumbed down version of his esoteric philosophy. Giordano Bruno, Cornelius Agrippa, all these people, Jacob Boehme, they all seem to have been influential figures on Hegel, and as well probably on Albert Pike too. So I don't know, again, well, I guess we could look and see. Did Albert Pike know about Hegel? I mean, he probably knew about him, but does he cite him in this book? Interesting question. Let's see if that's the case. Just out of curiosity, we're going to see. Hermetic schools, many quotes about that, obviously. Let's see. I don't see, however, any citations about Hegel. Okay, so Pike does not seem to cite Hegel, but it's just fascinating that the theological conclusions of Pike are identical to the process philosophy of God as world process, immanent pantheistic deity as Hegel. Interesting. By the way, if you want to support the show, do so via the super chat function. You can send me a super chat via Streamlabs. That's the only way to do it. That supports the show. I'll read those here in a minute. But I do want to talk about a couple other things that relate to symbolism. And so one of the things that I read early on that was helpful for symbolism is this kind of classic thing called Man and His Symbols. And it's kind of an introduction to Jungian approach to all these things. And it's a bunch of, it's an anthology. So it's basically a bunch of different psychoanalysis types. So there's Carl Jung is the first chapter, which I do recommend reading that one. Approaching the Unconscious. Ancient Myths and Modern Man, Joseph Henderson. Process of Individuation, which is a fascinating chapter by M.L. von Franz. Symbolism of the Visual Arts by Aniela Jaffe. Symbols in Individual Analysis, Yolan Jacobi. Science and the Unconscious. And the only reason I'm recommending this book is just because, okay, so this gives you like this introductory approach to Jungian archetypal analysis. But I don't agree with, I'm not a Jungian. And here's what's crazy about Carl Jung, because I didn't realize how wacky that dude was until I had a college class that was really good, by the way, called Theodicy and Literature. So basically we were dealing with the problem of evil in literature and philosophy. And we did a lot of Dostoevsky in there. we read Calvin, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, Schelling, Dostoevsky. And get this. A lot of people don't know this. This is a rare, like, it's hard to find. Maybe you can find it online. But, so Carl Jung has this essay called Aeon. And I kid you not, Carl Jung's Aeon essay is about Christ and Antichrist being the same figure. So it's literal Charles Manson theology. I'm God and the devil. Give God. Literal Charles Manson theology. Charles Manson. Got the whole club.
Charles Manson. Do the Charles Manson.
Right? It's called Aeon. And it is an attack on the notion of Christian metaphysics in support of Gnosticism and the idea that Jesus and Antichrist are flip sides of the same coin. Yes, you heard me right. I was like, whoa, dude. And he actually says in this that, you know how Jungians have this thing about you need to integrate your shadow self? He says Antichrist is shadow self. If we see the traditional figure of Christ as parallel to the psychic manifestation of the self, then Antichrist corresponds to the shadow self, the dark half of the human totality. And in Jungian stuff, right, you integrate the demonic to be a whole person, which is like, what? That's crazy. That's Manson level stuff, dude. And then he goes on to say that the true version of theology that I adhere to is, quote, the Gnostics, who were actually the true Christians from about 150 AD. Then he goes on to say that they understood the right and left hand of God. That's like Kabbalist, what would later become Kabbalistic stuff. They understood all of creation in terms of syzygies or pairs of opposites, in much the same way that the followers of Bardesanes and the dualists did. And then he goes on to say, in other words, Mani and the Manichaeans. So Carl Jung is literally saying that he is a Luciferian Gnostic because he believes that you must unite with and integrate the principle of Antichrist to do your shadow work. What is that gibberish the Jungians talk about? I'm doing my shadow work right now. I'm doing the shade work, whatever they call it. So then I realized, hey, wait a minute, actually this Jung stuff is crazy. Now, do you know that Carl Jung has a red book? Which is all of these manifestations of his spirit guide. Again, you can believe that he's BSing or that he really had a spirit guide. But he started getting these revelations from this entity, which I think actually he draws a picture of at one point in the... I think this book has a picture of his old man spirit guide, who's like obviously this creepy looking creeper dude. There it is. Imagine if that dude showed up at your door. Would you believe that old dude? I'd be like, get out of here, you old angelic creep. Get out of here, you old creep. So I think he drew that. That's the drawing of the dude. That's his, I think he calls him his spirit guide. And this is I don't guess it's that rare of a book, but it's like $300, right? So when you try to buy it, it's, super expensive, and it's like his Bible with all these goofy illustrations, which are actually not very good. And it's the revelations that he received in his dreams from this freaking old Coomer man here, looking like the freaking Six Flags dude or something. Imagine the old Six Flags dude coming to you in your dreams and being like, oh, I got revelations for you. You're the Look at that. Looks like something out of freaking Mario 2, dude. If something out of Mario 2 is talking to you, don't listen to it. Okay? There's no Goombas. Nobody from the Mushroom Kingdom is giving you insights into the metaphysics of the universe, dude. It's a damn demon.